Chris Pratt returns, but this time not as Star-Lord, as a Navy SEAL on Amazon. Is The Terminal List a good show? What is up, Flick fans? Welcome back to my channel. The Terminal List was something that I was super excited about, and even though I wasn't all that familiar with the source material, at least prior to getting excited for this TV show, I was interested to see how Pratt was going to do in this much more serious role. But I need you all down below. Do you know what the source material is all about? Were you excited for the series, and did it deliver? And is Chris Pratt playing Mario? All right, a former Navy SEAL officer investigates why his entire platoon was ambushed during a high-stakes covert mission. Pratt plays James Reece, who returns to his family with conflicting memories of the event and questions about his culpability. However, new evidence comes to light, and he discovers that there are dark forces working against him, endangering not only his life, but the lives of those that he loves. This is actually rated R, according to IMDb, but it's a TV show, so I'm going to say TV mature. For sex and nudity, violence, and gore. You have a lot of shootings and bloody scenes. We're dealing with the Navy SEALs here, so clearly there's going to be some violence, actually a lot of violence throughout the first couple of episodes, even though the action scenes are maybe fewer and farther in between than I could have anticipated. There are so many moments that focus more on the dialogue, which in turn will make many people upset if you're expecting a full-on action-packed series from start to finish. But that gives us the opportunity to kind of soak in Chris Pratt's performance. What happens at the end of the first episode? Again, I did not know the story, so I had no clue that was going to happen, and it shocked me. It put me on the edge of my seat, and I said, I cannot believe they just did that. And for that decision to happen, Pratt's going to have to deliver on some emotion, and I believe he does. I felt it. I really did. Now, prior to that, at the beginning of episode 1, I was struggling to get on board with what the story actually was, right? We're thrown into it almost immediately. We are having to keep up, as are our characters, which in turn can kind of work for the story that they're telling, because Chris Pratt, James Reece, is in his own way a narrator that we can't rely on. An unreliable narrator. I should have just said that. And while we are getting action scenes in episode 1, like I said, we are thrown into those scenes, but essentially we are witnessing this first tragic event that sets him out on this path, and we're slowly starting to discover that maybe there is something to this conspiracy. Now, I love a good conspiracy thriller. I love a good Navy SEAL or Army-centric movie or TV show, and to have one surrounding someone who is struggling from PTSD. He can't quite get his story straight. He's having conversations with his daughter at the beginning, and he can't remember very basic information. So that, to me, is something that you're able to connect to immediately, and that's the simplicity of episode 1. But starting to uncover this conspiracy, and as the web gets more convoluted and complicated, the story gets more convoluted and complicated until it isn't, right? And at that point in the show is when not only I was like, all right, this is what's happening. Unfortunately, I was starting to predict the moments that were happening. I'm like, yeah, we're going to get this twist and a turn, maybe not specifically, but along the lines of this. And me not knowing the source material at all, and then these things happening, I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if the book was that predictable. Now, diving into the book itself and Chris Pratt's love for it, so you know automatically that he's here and it's kind of a passion project for him. There were characters left out of the series, some new things included. It all kind of comes together in an overly complicated way in the show at the end of the day. Again, you can see certain beats coming, but there's a lot happening at points when there doesn't need to be a lot happening. You could have kept the story a bit more simplistic. And then some of these side performances and side characters in general. Riley Keough, she's good, doesn't have a ton to do here. Constance Wu was probably my favorite supporting character, even though at times her motivations were a bit iffy. Taylor Kish, who is one of my favorite underrated actors in the business, he was a bit more one note than maybe I needed him to be, or that relationship, that dynamic between Ben and James. And because some of these supporting characters are one note, the story starts to drag out just a bit. There are portions in the middle part of the season where I'm like, we could have moved a bit quicker. But when it picks up, it really picks up. And there's certain episodes that I genuinely loved when there's a clear focus and we're not as honed in on the villain side of things, which I just wasn't the biggest fan of. Essentially, when James Reece is the center of the story and we are locked in on James, I thoroughly enjoyed that. And even though it becomes overly convoluted at the end, following him along on his journey, the confusion and panic, everything that happens in the first 2 episodes, followed by, slowly starting to come together mentally, and a lot of this meaning so much to him because of what happened at the beginning. You feel that, and I felt that emotion. And a show like this that factors in realism on this level, I appreciate. I saw that the writer of the story was a Navy SEAL, so you have so much that feels grounded, and Pratt's character, whether that be the preparation or suffering from PTSD like he does in the series, the memory loss issues, the way that these scenes are edited together, that's something that I don't want to overlook, right? Oftentimes you can not appreciate that grounded realism on the level that you should. And when it started to become this outlandish Jason Bourne type of show is when it started to lose track for me. But when it's grounded, when it's down to earth, you can feel the rawness and the grittiness. That's when it works really well. Antoine Fuqua, who is one of the directors here, you can feel his touch at times, and because of that, I appreciated a lot of the action scenes. I definitely wanted more of them and less of the over-the-top conspiracy that takes up a lot of time and maybe too much time at the end of the day that took away from the Terminal List. But I feel like there is a large group of people who are going to enjoy this show, so that's definitely something to point out before you go in and binge it. My biggest issue with this series is that it's a bit more bloated than it needed to be. It did not need to be 8 hours. It felt like there was a 3-hour, that's a long movie, but maybe 3 episodes trapped in an 8-episode series. I think the complaint you're going to see is that Pratt isn't ridiculously captivating as this lead character, but it's not necessarily the character that he's playing, at least the one established in the first episode. So I was actually okay with his performance. I thought he did what he needed to do. It kind of reminds me of Ryan Gosling in First Man a couple of years ago. Everybody said he was boring, but I'm thinking to myself, that's probably accurate. I know Pratt's not playing a real character, but I felt as if that's what the character needed to be. But that's just my opinion. At the end of the day, well, before I give you my score, I need you guys in the comments down below. Did you enjoy this series? Did it work for you? Was it too long, too short? And are you a fan of these military-type shows and movies? I certainly am. After a rousing opening episode, the series falls into a handful of conventions that it struggles to recover from. Fortunately, there's more than enough grit and intrigue to suffice. And to be honest, this is just the kind of show that I gravitate towards, so I'm a bit easier on its flaws. I'm going to 60% with my score. It was a long binge, but there were some things in there that I really responded to. I'm so curious to see what you all think at the end of the day, especially after episode 1. It just ripped my heart out. That and Stranger Things, man. What a week. All right, you guys are the best. I'll see you soon.